There we go. Hey guys, what's up? We're back again, once again. It's Cole with Jess, continuing our series of live commentaries of various animated films. The last one we did was the Robin Hood one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was the one that broke with tradition a bit, because I mean, in a way, it was sort of like to not really do Disney ones and do ones that weren't, a little lesser known. Though, of course, everybody knows the Bluth one. This all started with the Bluth stuff, and they were big business. But sort of just to shine a light on some of those. But when we got to that, it was a movie I've just always wanted to do, and it is a lesser Disney one, although I think it's an excellent movie and part of a sort of a down era, darker era for Disney, as we talked about in that one. But we're bouncing back with something I think. I really don't know what people's experiences with this are, because this movie has quite a history, and we'll talk a little about that going into it. But I just mean, as far as the movie itself, like once it's done and it's out there in the world, like I have vague memories of maybe seeing parts of it as a kid. Maybe I went over someone's house and they had it on video. Like, while the movie bombed in both Japan and the US theatrically 3 years apart, it sold pretty well on video initially. Like, maybe just because parents thought it would be a good time waster or something for the kids to watch. So, I mean, it did make its way into a lot of North American homes in the early 90s. So maybe that's how I saw it, but I don't think I ever saw the complete movie till I was an adult. And then, found out the story behind it. And the other thing is, like, I really don't even know what the name Little Nemo means to most people. It's funny, when I already had this up and I was putting this, when I made my little banner here, I accidentally wrote Finding Nemo first. I put Finding Nemo eventually, because I mean, I think that's like what most people think of when they think of Nemo. They think of the Pixar film and the character. And of course, there's the classic Captain Nemo as Jules Verne, isn't it?
Yeah.
The guy from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and other fictions. So that's like a 19th
funny you
century
say that quick.
pulp character. Yeah.
Finding Nemo came out, and it made me think of Little Nemo. Adventures in Slumberland. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because I mean, so its origins are way back. So in its original form, Little Nemo was a newspaper strip, and it started, I think, it was like 1905. It was by artist Winsor McCay. So it's one of the original American comic strips, and it's a fascinating thing because in a way, it's so way back that newspapers didn't really have quite sort of the standards or rules for them or anything yet. Because, I mean, not to get onto a whole other topic, but, if you look up somebody like Bill Watterson, who had done Calvin and Hobbes, he would often talk about the frustration he felt in how limiting it was when he was trying to do newspaper strips, because the paper was like, you can only use this so many panels, you can only take up so much space and stuff like that. And that's sort of how it's been locked in for a long time. But back in Winsor McCay's day, he could do whatever he wanted. Like, they gave him pretty much like I don't know if they gave him a full page, but they gave him tons of space, and his stuff was in color. So he really used it to experiment. And like I said, as I said, Jess, I don't actually own any, although I'd like to at some point. I just have a little book here about some comic book stuff, and here's the only panel of it that I actually own. So here is a panel of the original Little Nemo. So
that's cool.
Way back, it had two runs. It went from like 1905 to, I don't know, sometime in the teens, and then it stopped. And then years later in the 20s, he got work at a different paper, and he revived it for another few years, but it wasn't quite as popular. And it's always been sort of a benchmark in sort of graphic fiction and comics, despite its simplicity, because just the movie itself is not really going to make things any more complicated, except that it's animated, in that it's about a boy named Nemo, who lives in the early start of the 20th century, and he goes to sleep and he has dreams of being in a place called like Slumberland. The idea being that every time he dreams, he comes back to sort of the same place. Like, he has continuing dreams, which was something I did experience in my early 20s. I had a succession of dreams that actually almost were a continuing story that picked up where the others left off. Nothing like this. But it was pretty cool. And it's very primitive as far as storytelling goes. It's mostly an excuse for Winsor McCay to show fantastic dreamscapes and vistas and creatures, and it's all very nice. The dialogue and the story is really nothing like the original story. It did sort of have a flowing arc. The only thing, and it's pretty much in this too, is like the idea is like the king of dreams, Morpheus, no, not that one, wants him to like come and be like Prince and like marry his daughter or something like that. Or maybe in some it's not really marry his daughter, it's like just be his daughter's playmate or something. She's the princess and stuff like that. And there's like this stupid character called Flip, who's also in this movie that we'll see that helps him get in trouble and things like that. But apart from that, it's just, and it always ends the same way. Nemo waking up with a start and like maybe falling out of bed or something or crying out. And his parents always come in at the end. And it's pretty funny because this is early 20th century. This is child psychology back then. They're like, Nemo, you keep having these dreams. You shouldn't eat late. It's always about like something he ate. Every time they're like, you shouldn't have had that custard pie, or you shouldn't have, it's always, that's their solution for everything. And Nemo's like, oh, it goes on. And another thing is, while the art is quite sophisticated, and one of the reasons why it's such a memorable comic, there's some really detailed art in it, and colors and things like that, is like, again, this is all single stuff. It's just Winsor McKay. There's not a team. It's not like the production teams of today is with inkers and everything like that. And certainly no such thing as a professional letterer existed back then. So one thing you'll notice if you do look up this comic is that the lettering is terrible. It's in no way professional. It just looked like a kid did it, to the point that sometimes it's almost illegible. So in some ways, it kind of ruins how nice the art is, because he would just shit at speech balloons and lettering, and it really shows and kind of clashes with everything. But, that's okay. So anyway, so I don't know how many people actually are aware of that comic, but that's what it was. And it's always been influential throughout the 20th century. And actually, speaking to this movie's long trouble production, it started officially it started in 1982, and it didn't get released till 89, and then it had delayed release before it came to the US 3 years later in 92. That's why, if anybody's confused by me putting 89 on there, that's because it's an original release, because maybe some people, including here on Prime, which is where Jess and I are both streaming it, it shows it as a 1992 movie, but originally it's 1989. But anyway, I talked myself off track there. I was going to say, is that even well before this movie anyway, was like, even during Walt Disney's lifetime, twice there was at least an idea to adapt it into an animated film that never came to a fruition. So that's like in like 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, something like that. Like, I can't really find anything detailed. Just that at least twice there were some sort of half-hearted attempts to, I don't know, get the rights or get the project going. But anyway, where this picks up is that we have a Japanese animation producer named Yutaka Fujioka, and he was the president of an animation studio called Tokyo Movie Shinisa, which is known as TMS. And maybe some people are familiar with that because in the 90s, they would go on to do some of the animation for some well-known American cartoons, like Batman the Animated Series, Tiny Toon Adventures, and I think the Animaniacs. So, they did eventually break through and do that. But originally, so if you're going back again, this is the end of the 70s, Japanese animation wasn't as sophisticated as we all think of it. We all remember, they were way ahead of everybody else. But this is when they were kind of in lockstep, and Disney still dominated and everything like that. And he saw the Japanese market as fairly limited. And ironically, it would develop at a rapid pace while this movie was sort of in production. And his idea was, I want to do a joint American thing. I want to work with American producers and have like a joint Japanese-American animated feature and bring it to a higher level than we've seen, bigger budget and all that. So originally who he really wanted to be the producer was George Lucas, which makes a lot of sense. George Lucas did meet with him and listened to him and was polite. And he turned him down, but he referred him to Gary Kurtz, who of course was an associate of Lucas and had produced the first 2 Star Wars movies. And he would also, during the 80s, produce some of the best fantasy films. He did I love The Dark Crystal, and I love also Return to Oz. He's the producer on both of those.
Oh, yeah.
So originally, he did agree to be the producer of this movie. And so many names, not just in animation, but just like in the film industry, it's almost a who's who, were attached to this film at one point or another, even if nothing ever came of it. A young Brad Bird, he worked on this film for a while. I don't know of anything in the finished product of his, but he did work on it. Of course, famous sci-fi author Ray Bradbury, who had moved on to doing some screenplays. He was the initial guy for the screenplay, but again, his ideas were pretty different. He had this idea of like Nemo spelled backwards is Omen. Maybe he can have like a split personality or some other side of him that he fights against that's kind of evil. Like he had that going on. And who else we got? Chris Columbus, I think at one point might have even been directing it, even though he was never directed animation. He still is part of this. He he co-wrote the final script that we see. So he's on there too. And of course, on the Japanese side of it, again, somewhat ironically, because this is before the great Studio Ghibli had started. Remember, this is 82 at the very beginning. Both Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, I think their names are. Takahata, the other sort of forgotten guy. But anyway, the guys that they'd be the main forces and founding Studio Ghibli, they were both part of it too. And Miyazaki had all these ideas but really he didn't like the idea of Nemo in the first place. He thought the idea of making something that takes place in a dream world would immediately take the audience out of it. And everything he pitched, like to Kurtz, and I think maybe Bradbury, just turned out to be ideas that were not really related to Nemo. That he would, especially, most notably, ideas that he'd eventually make in his own film, Castle in the Sky. Here, oh shoot, there goes the stupid. Perfect time for this to blur. Okay, there goes Castle in the Sky, which came out in '86, Laputa. Because he had some of the core ideas for that he was first pitching for this movie, which was like, the place the boy hero goes to is like some sort of hidden, forgotten, broken down kingdom, and there's ancient robots and all this stuff. It didn't really fit, so I can understand. But anyway, and he was rebuffed a few times. By the time he left the project without really contributing anything, and he would later say it was the worst experience of his professional life. So there's that too. I'm trying to think if there's any other, like I said, there's probably other names that I'm forgetting, but Ray Bradbury had been along with this for quite some time. But it's funny at the top that our original guy here, Fujioka, he had never intended to be the main producer on it, but then he sort of had to fall into it. So as I said, at the time, those guys, Miyazaki and Takahata, they hadn't completely established themselves, but they had, because this is just before Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Here's the steelbook of it, which says a Studio Ghibli film, but technically wasn't. It's an unofficial Studio Ghibli film because it came out in '84, just before it was officially formed. So it really is a Studio Ghibli thing in everything but name. Anyway, that's '84. But in '79, he directed his first feature-length animated film, the Lupin the Third movie, Castle of Cagliostro. So I assume that's what sort of put him on Fujioka's radar. But anyway, so we go all sorts of things. He also talked to Chuck Jones, who was, of course, a big deal in American animation. He was one other person that just turned him down and wasn't involved. But by the time we get through to this, John Lasseter was around, and this is how John Lasseter was introduced to Miyazaki. Because if anybody has watched any of like the extras on some of these, you might get an intro from John Lasseter talking about how much he loves Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki, and how this is how he first met him. It's also how famed French artist Jean Giraud, better known as Mobius, got involved, and that's also how he and Miyazaki met too, and they became really good friends. Mobius would name his daughter Nausicaa a few years later. So anyway, I don't have time to get into Mobius, but he's one of the giants again of the comic world. He's a French artist who eventually did make the jump into movies. And if you've seen anything like, I don't know, anything like The Fifth Element or something, like that's him. That design, that's him. And he's all over the place. But anyway, he died a few years ago. But anyway, huge giant. And what's funny is, even though he's primarily an artist, he wrote too. He's not the script guy, but the original story that this is based on is credited to, I think, let me double check here just to make sure. It is credited to Fujioka himself and Mobius. So they came up with the actual story, and then the screenplay was done by Chris Columbus and another American screenwriter called Richard Uten, who's been around but hasn't really done too much. And it wound up actually being co-directed by an American and a Japanese, and I don't really know either of them, Masami Hata and William Hertz. And I don't know who either of them are, but they are the co-directors of this feature. So anyway, this went through all sorts of changes and stuff and rubbed people the wrong way and took years to come out. And the finished product is not very good, as we're going to see. But the animation's nice, so at least we can talk about that. But I mean, I've just always been fascinated by the genesis of this movie. And bring it all the way back around again to like, what do people like actually remember or know? And the thing is that this did lead to Capcom in the 90s making a video game based on it called Little Nemo Dream Master, which I played, and it's very good. And I think for a lot of people, that's what they know. That was like the most successful thing. It was a good game. You know, Capcom was really knocking out of the park with those licensed games in the 90s. You know, they did a lot of those Disney games and things like that, and they were good, solid games. And so was that game. So I'm pretty sure that was my introduction, was sometime in the early 90s. I played the Nintendo game, and I knew that. But it wasn't until many years later that maybe I had remembered seeing some of the movie or anything like that. So we're watching the English dub. It's pretty hard to get the Japanese dub. There's a Blu-ray that came out in 2012, and I think it's out of print. It's all out of print. If you want to get by any version of this movie, you'll probably have to cough up some money unless you get lucky. So, I've got a burnt copy of the original DVD, which of course is the thing. Because the other thing that interests me besides just the dub is apparently the original Japanese version also has like 10 to 11 minutes more that they cut over here, I think because they were worried it was make it a little more PG, a little darker, which is too bad because it probably would have helped. But then again, maybe the movie should be kept shorter because it's not very good. So we'll get in here. So anybody who now or in the future wants to sync this up with us, for us, the first thing that comes up is the TMS logo, Tokyo Movie Shinsaku Co-Limited or whatever. So we'll do that and we'll get into it. Oh, and another thing, speaking of famous names, this movie does have some songs in it. They're not very good, but they are composed by the world-famous songwriting duo, the Sherman Brothers, who are, again, giants of the industry, the guys that wrote so many hit songs for, most notably Disney. Really getting going with like Mary Poppins, but so many others. They were both around 60 years old, but they were still working. And these songs aren't good, but I don't know. Pretty much nobody really brought their A game to this. Not really.
They probably were doing with what they had to work with too.
Yeah. And I don't know how long they had, like, as long as the production was. I don't know when they came in, right? And I don't know if it was even originally envisioned to have music or if that was some pressure put on by, like, what Disney was doing at the time. I don't know. So the songs aren't very good, but they are mercifully short, at least. We can say that much. Mickey Rooney's in here. He's playing Flip, so okay. So we can get going here. That's enough preamble, but yeah, I think the history of the movie is much more fascinating than the movie itself. But there still is something here, so we're going to jump into it. We will do a countdown, and we'll get going. And I'll try to adjust my volume so it doesn't blow anybody away. So we'll do a 3, 2, 1, hit play, and we'll go. All right. 3, 2, 1, ignition. Opens with a bit of a song. I remember that much. So I went back and forth whether I'd watch this in preparation beforehand, but I thought, be surprised, There you are, Masami Hata and William Hurts. I don't know either of them. I have no idea either of them. There you go, Chris Columbus. But maybe I misread, but I thought for sure somewhere, there it is, Jean Mobius Giraud. But was that Columbus was at one point, maybe at least asked, maybe he never considered it was directed, which was really weird because, directing animation is completely different. Is completely different than directing a live action film.
Ray Bradbury. I didn't know he still had a credit.
Okay,
and I just saw the old men from Disney, Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas.
Oh, good catch. Good catch. So yeah, as I said, I'll turn it down a bit. I can already tell it's a bit too loud. A song going here. So some of the stuff that's wrong with the movie isn't really that bad because it's kind of what I said about the comic. For instance, Brian Froud, there's a name. Brian Froud was, he's a conceptual artist, but the main thing he's known for is he's basically the man that created the look of the Dark Crystal. Like, he's the main concept artist behind the Dark Crystal. And I love him for that. It still seems a bit too loud. But these are some really boring, terrible credits. It's just just a
blue background, white lettering.
Apparently, this had to do with the cuts too. That supposedly this looks a little better in the Japanese version, and the song we're hearing now actually comes later. But in the case of this, they had to cut stuff, so they were like, "There's no room for the song," so put the song over the credits, and they didn't. Oh, Tress MacNeille, even back then, Nancy Cartwright,
Bart Simpson, Michael Gough. And I forgot Mickey Rooney was in this. Who was the other one I saw and I missed it? I don't know. More names than I remember.
Yeah. Mickey Rooney. Yeah, his career as a voice actor is pretty terrible. But whatever.
Hey, Care Bears movie was just.
He's good. Yeah, he's just a narrator guy in that. Fair enough.
That's true.
Still going here, but yeah, I was going to say, some of the limitations in the movie do reflect just the limitation of the comic, which is very simple. So, and himself, like Nemo, as we're going to see, he's going to be annoying, but we can't get too mad about him because his only purpose in the movie is not to grow or meet challenges or anything. It's to react to stuff. The whole movie is here's Nemo's dialogue the whole movie. Wow, wee, what? Huh? That's what we're in for. Is Nemo just reacting to shit. But whatever.
I do remember how beautifully animated this is, actually.
That is its saving grace, is that, it didn't have the impact, obviously, that anybody involved was hoping for. Particularly, I said it was a bad example for Miyazaki, but I mean, at least from Miyazaki's perspective, it was just something he it wasn't his, that he kind of got pulled into for a while and then left. I mean, in the case of is Fujiaka? Yeah. In the case of Fujiaka, he was so disillusioned that he immediately retired once this was over. So the studio continued, but without him. He was done. So this obviously sucked a lot out of him, 7 years of his life trying to get this going. Just too bad.
Well, I'll tell you what I remember, the little bit I do. I haven't watched this since I was a kid.
Right.
And I remember, I think it was played on the Disney Channel when it hit the U.S.
Highly possible.
North America. I remember the trailers, and I remember being excited about it. And I could be wrong. This could just be a memory I've just made up in my head. But I feel like the trailers got me excited. And then I watched the movie, and the trailer made me think it was going to be different than what it actually was.
Yeah. I mean, you can just tell, like I said, because of how good it looks, but the substance, it's definitely the type of movie where a trailer can make it look a lot better because it's just, lush animation, cool, fantastic vistas and things like that, The movie never quite lives up to the potential.
And I think that's what happened to me as a kid. I wasn't a super young kid when we finally got this here, but I was still young enough. And
yeah,
I don't know if I just found the story boring. It's been so long. I don't know what I disliked about it, but I've never revisited it.
It is a boring story. That's as we're going to find out. It's a pretty boring story. And I think maybe if all the time this was made, like I said, I don't want to criticize it because the comic itself was always quite simple. Although it was simple as it was, it managed to run for a long time. So Winsor McKay was able to put ideas next to each other. He didn't repeat himself too much. He definitely did repeat himself. I've seen some instances of that where he kind of does the same thing a few years later. This is just supposed to show, I guess, that there is a dark side to dreaming, I guess. Also, I put
right into it.
When I advertised this on Twitter, it just occurred to me, that, of course, the Sandman show is out on Netflix now. So everybody's thinking about, this was never intended to coincide with that. I had this thought of long ago. But they are both about the dream world, as different as they are. But making my way through that show, it's mostly okay. I don't know. It's something about it kind of bores me, to tell you the truth. Like, I don't have any, fist shaking things or I'm mad, It's the usual backlash. A lot of people, it's like the show's gone woke because of blah blah. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're forgetting what the comic was actually like. But I do find it a little dull. I don't know, but the casting's good. The effects are wonderful. The look is right. So I mean, it is very good, and I'm glad it's doing well. But as far as Sandman goes, I'm just a few years too young. Like if I was maybe 3-4 years older, I would have been right in there. It would have been me in 1993, reading The Sandman, listening to Tori Amos, dressing in black. I was just a few years a little too late for it. But so I can't love it the same way certain people do. But I mean, it's an excellent comic.
I haven't got into that one. I'm looking it up now.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the ones that's always brought up as elevating the medium, really helping give comics respect, which really was something that started to happen in the late 80s, early 90s. And Neil Gaiman, he's famous for many things, but it's his big thing. It's where he started. He was 26-year-old old when he started. It makes me sick. Sandman, and he's of course written many best-selling novels and things like that. But Sandman is his opus, and it's really something. And it was certainly a very different thing at the time. Property. especially for something like DC to do. It eventually became the premier title of the Vertigo imprint. And I mean, I'm not sure, but I would say that probably like that's why Vertigo even existed. And then again, it was sort of part of a nice renaissance for comics. They were more original, they were more mature, and things like that. I'll always be a big fan of Spider-Man and Batman stuff, but there's more to comics than that. So I mean, as far as the humans and things are drawn, this is very faithful to how things looked in the comics. Like the animators and artists, they did follow that blueprint. The look, the costumes, the colors, everything. Okay, this is just made up bullshit. So I guess, again, following the Disney thing, they're like...
I was going to say the squirrel.
You have to have a cute animal sidekick, which doesn't even make sense because 90% of this movie is not in the waking world. So yeah, this is Icarus, the flying squirrel, who I'm pretty sure is not in the comic. Not that it really matters, but it's so unnecessary because most of the movie's in the dream world. And Icarus does not share his dream, so he's not there. So, I mean, do we really need a cute thing? So the whole thing here is that the circus is coming to town. It blows his mind.
Did Icarus cross over to the video game, or am I just thinking of Kid Icarus?
That's a good question. My memories are all jumbled too, right? So I'm not sure. Because I mean, Kid Icarus was an angel thing. He wasn't a squirrel, but who knows? So that clown there is a little bit reminiscent of Flip. I guess the idea is the things he sees here are going to feed into, because that's like the king, is going to feed into the imagery that he sees in the dream world. But this is all really happening. This is the waking world. He's just jumping onto a horse in the middle of a parade, and his parents don't seem to care.
It was a different time.
It really was. I mean, again, it just blows my mind when I think of how old the comic was. Because, I think about the old comics. I'm like, oh, yeah, Golden Age. 1938. This is like 30 years before that. Fuck.
Yeah.
Like everybody that
we're talking over 100 years now.
Yeah. Everybody that had anything to do with Little Nemo Dak and its original run is long dead.
Yeah. And a note earlier, this is obvious to Cole, but the Sandman he was talking about was a DC Comics, not Marvel, correct?
Yeah. So very quickly, I'll just say, speaking of the Golden Age, there was a DC. He was a superhero called the Sandman, and he had a gas mask because he had a gun that will put people to sleep. That was the same thing, and he was really cool for a while. But then he got like a weird update where they turned him into like a more normal superhero. Like suddenly he had a cape and a costume, and he had a young sidekick. It was all bullshit. But the original. So as a result of the success, and so. His first thing at DC was something called Black Orchid, which does tentatively somewhat take place in the DC universe, and he gives some little nods and spins to existing characters. And the idea, once again, was like, with Sandman, he had this idea of like, I could revive that. But they were like, you know what? Throw that out the window. Make your own Sandman. And he loved that idea because it gave him license to do anything. But as a result, a few years later in the early 90s, that comic was doing so well that it revived the original Sandman, and and I like those comics even more. They're really great because they're actually set in like the late 30s. Wesley, and he's such a different sort of superhero. He's like a pulp guy, kind of like the Shadow, he's Wesley Dodds. He's this somewhat well-off, bookish-looking guy who lives in 1930s New York, but he has these dreams that compel him. So at night, he's the Sandman, and he fights crime and stuff. And it's so good. It's called a Sandman Mystery Theater. And they're great comics. I think Matt Wagner was the main author on them. I've been slowly collecting them over the years, piecing them together, but they're just such great. I love that they're set back then. And then in the DC comics, running concurrently, some people even acknowledged like that's part of DC's history because he would have been on, before there was the Justice League. If you go back to World War II era, there was the Justice Society. So Sandman was part of the Justice Society of America. He was one of those guys, which would have been like with the original Starman and stuff like that. When they did a cool 90s Starman, a completely new Starman, actually the son of the original, they had a comic where Wesley Dodds, while he was like into his 80s, was still alive. It's pretty cool. I think as far as canon in DC goes now, I don't know where it's at. I don't know if he eventually died or what. But anyway, I always love Wesley Dodds, the Wesley Dodds Sandman. And they did do a crossover of both Sandmans. There was one called Sandman Midnight Theater, and it's where they actually cross paths, which makes sense in a way because how the Neil Gaiman Sandman opens is that this cultist does this ritual because he's trying to summon death, but he accidentally summons Dream. That's who the Sandman is, but he doesn't know who he is or what he is, so he traps him, and he keeps him trapped in the basement of his mansion for decades. And the comic picks up with him finally in current day, which would have been like 87 or something like that, like him escaping. But anyway, so they have this idea that like, and this would have been over in England, that at some point Wesley Dodds traveled to England and was invited to this party of the cultists, and as the Sandman went down and he had an encounter with the trap Sandman. It's pretty cool. It's brief, but it's cool. And it shows how they are linked, because even though Wesley Dodds is a human, he's kind of like our Nemo. He has some sort of connection to the realm of dreams. And that is another reason why, even though Little Nemo's not that good, I like, oh, listen to this guy. He calls himself Professor Genius. Well, that's an imaginative name.
It's genius.
So here's the whole thing. The King Morpheus sent him, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I know it's a big cliche and maybe gets overused in fiction, but I love dream stuff. I love dream stuff, because in a way there's no rules. And also I love the symbolism and things like that. Some of my favorite things in like fantasy, like in A Song of Ice and Fire, is one of the things I don't like about the Game of Thrones, because they pretty much do nothing with the dreams. But in Song of Ice and Fire, characters' dreams are really important, and they're full of symbolism. You can figure stuff out later, and they foreshadow events and stuff like that. And so, like in my own writing, I try to do dream stuff. It's one of the reasons why I won't watch that movie. What is it? The Christopher Nolan movie. What's that?
Oh, is it Inception?
Inception. Like, I'm sure Inception is very different from any fucking thing I wrote. But like back in 2006, a novel that I never finished had a character that could go into other people's dreams, which I get. I'm not the first person to think of that either. I know that. But just Inception always annoyed me, because I was like, I've never finished this. People are like going to be like, just like Inception. But probably not. I don't know.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Just like, I think the underrated side of an author like H.P. Lovecraft, cosmic horror and all that, was like, he did have the other side of his fiction. One was, cosmic horror, crazy, alien god creatures that will make your head explode if you even look at them and drive you nuts and stuff. But then the other thing was, he had his own dream cycle about characters that would go into the dream world and encounter things, and they're really good too. So that's made a big impact on me. So we haven't talked through much here. Obviously, he is in Slumberland, he's on his way to Slumberland. He's in the dream realm, and he's going to go. So most of the scene just going again, hi, wow, yay. Okay, so Icarus is with him in the dream. So he has a dream Icarus. Okay. I guess that makes sense. If you're going to create a stupid furry animal companion, you can't have him not come along for the adventure. So I guess he is part of the adventure. I thought, oh, he's not. He's in the waking world, so he won't come. But apparently he has a dream Icarus. I guess it makes sense.
Now the question is Icarus dreaming with him, or actually pulled into his dreams, or is he just dreaming Icarus in there? And
fair enough, I guess they leave that up to interpretation. Maybe the movie's deeper than we think, right? Maybe maybe Icarus has gone to sleep, and he, again, like you said, maybe he's pulled him into the dream.
And I'll try to not bring this up again, but man, the animation, the backgrounds in this, I've been watching, in the house details and what's on the side table.
It seems like the movie, again, I can't make excuses for it, and it's not that good, but I do feel like, while it didn't do well in Japan in 89, if it had gotten a US release in 89, it might have. Because just in those few short years, the competition was different. Because once again, speaking of Studio Ghibli, I didn't grab the movie, and it's the one I most recently watched because I saw it in theaters just last week as a special screening. But in 1989, at the same time that this movie was released in Japan, the current Studio Ghibli film was Kiki's Delivery Service, and it slaughtered this movie at the box office.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So, 89 was really kind of the real, we've talked a lot about the Disney Renaissance and how it was kind of a slow build, but the real kickoff was 89 with The Little Mermaid. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head what month The Little Mermaid came out in, but, maybe it's possible that if they could have gotten this out even in 90, it might have had more of an impact on the U.S. market. I don't know, because you think by 92, Disney's already done 3, incredible movies to sort of pick themselves back up after some perceived mediocrity, where you've got Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin in that span, which would make this movie seem less impressive by comparison, for sure. So I wonder if they could have gotten this out in into North American theaters in '89, if it would have helped, maybe at least a little bit. I mean, it's not that good of a movie. As I said, it is interesting that it did fairly well on video over here.
I again think a little bit of that might have been deception of the trailer.
Yeah, I think so for sure. But yeah, I mean, look at Dreamland. I mean, even the color palette is very faithful to the comics. I don't know what kind of, paint or ink that Winsor McKay worked with way back then, but his colors were very pastel-like this, sort of a washed out, sort of vivid, but I would say pastel is the closest thing. And they, as you can see, that's what they're doing here. So there is a lot of faithfulness.
And you got to respect that for sure.
Mm-hmm. I do actually have. I said I don't have any Little Nemo comics. That's not true entirely, because in 2009, I think IDW or somebody launched like a reboot, and I only bought the first issue, but I have no idea where it is. I don't know how long it lasted or anything, but I have the first issue somewhere. But when I thought about digging for it, I was like, no, because I mean, usually I can find my comics because I have runs of things, but if it's just one thing, I'm not sure where I stuck it. So I wasn't gonna like go rooting through my boxes just to find it, because I mean, again, it doesn't really have any main connection to this or anything. This came out way after the fact. It's just a sort of a reboot. Although I'm sure the story was supposed to be a little bit more sophisticated. Yeah, so the imagery here is a little reminiscent of Wizard of Oz, but again, this predates Wizard of Oz, the 1939 film, as far as the source material goes.
Yeah.
But there's a part later when there's actually some conflict. There is actually some conflict and danger in this movie. It eventually happens that is very reminiscent of Wizard of Oz, but I won't have to point it out. You'll know it because it's something I remember. All right, so where's the king? This seems like here we're already at the conflict. The king is missing. Something's going on here, but it's really kind of a fake out, I think. It's also true to the comic in that he is in his pajamas. There's Flip. Oh boy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's true to the original character because, like, his main thing is just to like mess around and get Nemo in trouble, and that's more or less what he does here. So, good job, I guess. I mean, at least it's a slightly less wholesome character for Mickey Rooney, because usually he just plays the warm, fatherly, really kind person, like in Care Bears, whatever. In this, he is kind of a scamp and troublemaker.
Gee, Jiminy Jillikers.
That's my favorite episode of The Simpsons.
It's a great one.
That's number one. Radioactive Man. That is number one. To me, that is
nice.
The best. So yeah, and also that was back when the celebrity cameos were good. Because I mean, think about it; it was pretty short and small. Like I hated it especially really happened around the 2000s, where like if they had a celebrity, the whole episode revolved around it. I thought it was so much better to just have celebrities pop up for weird reasons, kind of like what they did with Mickey Rooney, where he just pops up
it's
to like
perfect.
Just to give a pep talk to Milhouse.
That honestly is about the time that I was done with The Simpsons.
Oh yeah, early 2000s where most people left off, and it's too bad because it did. I'm one of the few people that kind of stuck with it for a while, and it rebounds. Once you get to about 2006, it gets better. But I would say like between 2000 and 2005, 2006, those are most. I mean, again, it's not like still The Simpsons. There's some good stuff in there, but yeah, it's mostly forgettable stuff, and some of it is just because like, for me, seasons like 2 through about 9 are golden.
Just golden, yeah.
And season 7, as I can have a good memory, is the best for me. I love season 7. I'm pretty sure Radioactive Man is part of season 7. Not 100% sure. So they're in some forbidden, toy factory. So I think that's the king. So he's missing just because he's messing around with his toys.
Toys, riding the train.
He's a train enthusiast. Nothing wrong with that.
Now, we're not supposed to know it's the king yet, are we?
No.
Okay.
It's supposed to be like you said, the king is missing, but we wouldn't think this idiot's the king,
No.
Is the king. King Santa Claus. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder when do kids stop loving trains?
I don't know. My son loved them his first 3 years of life.
I did have a train set, but it didn't last very long. Like I don't think I used it for very long before it was like packed away. I think if you go to my parents' house, I can still find parts of it. It was a very simple, basic train set. It wasn't like one of those really cool, elaborate ones with a little town. I mean, maybe if I had gotten into it. I mean, I love this idea. Once again, it reminds me of The Simpsons. It's like when Bart got adopted by Mr. Burns, remember? That whole thing, like, where he makes him his heir, and he's like, wow, the train's gone. He's like, yeah, I don't know where it goes, but it'll be back in 3 hours. He's like, one time it had snow on it. So, I like that idea. Like, if you had a train like this, they could go all over the place. But the reality is, train sets are just. Now this goes on a little longer than I thought. Yeah, they still haven't even revealed that that's the king. Like, finally, obviously, the Professor Genius here, who
he's gonna know,
is going to. Your Majesty, right? Yeah.
I wanted to look up.
Oh shit, he's the king. Morphe. What do you think, Squirrel with airplane goggles? Which, I mean, wasn't that like Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle's shtick? It's like a weird thing to insert into this. Like a flying squirrel with like goggles. That's like Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah.
That old trick never works. As a few times I've trashed that era of animation, but there is some stuff I enjoy. And I remember I used to watch. That used to come on late at night on YTV, reruns of that. I liked it because it did have a cleverness to it that felt kind of adult. I remember watching the Rocky and Bullwinkle stuff.
It's fun. It's just mostly fun. Not the greatest but it's cheap animation, a lot of it too, Yeah. You're not getting your.
And as I said, I kind of dismissive of that era of the limited animation and not much. Like, I'm not like one of those people that fondly remembers like most like Hanna-Barbera stuff like that. Like, I'm like, no, I didn't even like it when I was a kid. But that's one it just had it had some wit to it, I guess. I mean, the jokes were corny, but in a way it was on purpose, so I liked it.
It is. I couldn't think of the limited animation. I was going to say like half the frames. They cut the frames in half so they didn't have to animate as much.
Constantly
Filmation,
backgrounds, and all that stuff. Those things kind of freak me out because they're vaguely clown-like, and I'm one of those typical people. Like, there's nothing original about my fears. I do have the fear of clowns.
My mom does too. I love it.
But even more so than clowns, it's what's the word? Ventriloquist dummies. The classic ventriloquist dummy. If there was one of those in a room, I would not go in that room.
Those are creepy.
If it was like in my home, I would have to remove it. I'd have to like throw it into a wood chipper. I mean, I actually enjoy the movie Dead Silence just because it forces me to confront that. I can't believe with all the shitty horror sequels out there, there's no Dead Silence sequel. Why is that?
It's a good question.
I mean, that movie was not like a big hit or anything, but I mean, think of all the crappy horror movies that barely made a blip that got like 15 sequels.
15,
and Dead Silence doesn't get one? That seems ridiculous.
And it was solid. It was a solid, creepy.
Solid.
Yeah.
All right, so there's Meeting the Princess. So I'm not sure what they brought up. In most of it, it's just I think in the original, it's just like you're supposed to be here to be her playmate. Like that's the reason we brought you. Is she's lonely, and even though we have a whole kingdom full of weirdos bouncing around, we need you to be her playmate. I don't know. So she's all snobby and stuff that you'd expect.
I was thinking if I was wealthy, I would send you one of those ventriloquist dummies as a gag gift.
Oh man.
Sure, you'd throw it right in the trash, but like I said, if I had money to throw away, it'd be fun.
Yeah, no, those things really unnerved me. I mean, even like the old like Goosebumps episode with him. You know, Night of the Living Dummy. I read the book too. You know, it freaked me out.
Wasn't there an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode as well that kind of...
Oh yeah. They kind of mirrored each other. They did a lot of similar things, and I watched both of them. They were on around the same time, both Canadian productions. I haven't seen any either in a long time, though. But yeah, they were a big part of stuff I watched back in the day.
Heck yeah.
Submitted for your approval, the approval of the Midnight Society.
Yes. I love that show so much when it first ran.
Yeah, the original group was the best, and the leader, Gary, played by Ross Hull, who was in everything Canadian in the 90s. I don't know.
Was he? Okay.
Did you ever... Yeah, like, around the same time, early 90s, when he was about the same age, he was on a show called Ready or Not, which was actually mostly about a girl, and just, like, he was, like, a junior high age girl and the stuff she did. But he was, like, a kind of on-again, off-again, geeky love interest of hers. But then in the later 90s, when he was high school, there was a show called Student Bodies that, I don't know, it was just sort of like a cheeky high school Saved by the Bell type of show. And he was on that. And he was great in that. He eventually wound up on the Weather
a bit
Channel.
Of Student Bodies.
It's pretty sad. Yeah, Student Bodies had the idea, the main character, his thing was like he drew little satirical cartoons. And the idea was their high school paper was run by a couple of like annoying morons, so they made like an underground paper to fight it called Student Bodies, and complete with his like satirical cartoons. So the show had transitions between scenes that were like little brief animated things. It's funny because that show Hilary Duff was on ripped it off a few years later. The Hilary Duff show, what the hell was that? Lizzie McGuire. So if you ever saw Lizzie McGuire, you know, sometimes it would cut to like a cartoon version of herself doing something. Like Student Bodies did that first.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a pretty cool show. But he was probably in other stuff too. But I remember as of like 10 years ago, I remember seeing him. He was on the Weather Channel. Made me sad. It's like, you were a good actor, man. And now he's like, you know, on the Weather Channel working like as a meteorologist, pointing at maps. But he was...
and Ready or Not. Okay, that did run on the Disney Channel. I didn't watch it, but...
I didn't watch it much. It wasn't one I liked, but it, you know... But the others, I was a big fan of the others. Student Bodies and, of course, Are You Afraid of the Dark? But yeah, he was Gary, the original sort of leader, the original lineup. But the lineup changed over time.
Yeah. Like, I agree with you, that first.
So this bit goes on way too long. Because we get it, they're having fun and everything, but, you know, it gets boring after a while. Like,
even
okay,
for a kid with all the the beauty of it and going on, it gets boring.
But, you know, because, yeah. I mean, we get it. They're having fun, but we're not. It'd be fun if we were there, but it's not so fun to watch type thing.
Yeah.
But see, you know, eventually, again, there is sort of a adventure aspect to this movie that they get to, but it takes too long to kick in. So I think I'll get a look here. He's got something around his neck, I think, because we were talking. But the king gave him like a key. I think he's already given him a key. We'll see if we get a look at weather nymphs. Yeah, I can't see his neck now because they're all in balls.
He's in the ball.
Giant butterflies, very nice. Oh, I like how the butterflies realize that they have to stay with their color. It's weird that one of those random clown things is with them, and you think that like that's going to be like a character, but no, she's just hanging out with them for the moment. All the animals here running reminds me of like something from Fantasia or something.
Those animals definitely have a Disney drawing look to them.
Oh, look at that. That's gorgeous. That's beautiful.
But they're even more detailed.
which really is the hallmark of a Japanese animation studio. This is weird because it almost suggests like they're naked under that. They're not.
I was just wondering.
It seems to seem like they are, which would be kind of weird. Now he's back. He does eventually get clothes too. Okay, so the king didn't give him the thing yet. I guess that's good because the king's going to give him a thing, and that's where sort of the actual plot kind of finally kicks in a bit.
It's not in his pajama nightgown thing under the.
Yeah, they're finally going to give him some clothes. Mostly, I would just want shoes. Bare feet there. Still, it might be Slumberland and really nice, but it might be possible to step on something sharp. I don't remember this at all. This is like Annie.
Yeah.
Where the staff are singing to her. No, I don't remember
Daddy
this bit at
Warbucks.
all. Yeah, several of them. Yeah, so this is a bit I don't remember, but obviously, yeah, they're trying to teach him proper etiquette and all that shit. You ruined it. And there's something that Disney would like to use later on. Boobs for humor. There's a couple of movies they really lean into that in. I'm trying to remember.
Oh, yeah. With large, robust women, too.
Yeah. And somebody getting, like, their face buried in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Is
I know
that
there's
offensive now?
I don't know. I mean, I know there's a quick one in Aladdin during the chase song, right? But that's pretty quick. I know there's a more established thing. It's funny.
I think he's rather tasty.
So if you see that, I don't know if you, because I remember telling you I didn't actually hate the Aladdin live action as much as I expected to. It doesn't mean it's good. It's not. But I remember specifically in that bit where the woman comes out to do that, the camera goes off her before she even finishes the line. It's weird.
Oh.
It's really fast.
I could not finish that movie. I'm sorry. I did not like it.
No, I didn't like it either, but it surprised me that I thought I would hate it, and I didn't. And the other thing was, like, I figured Will Smith would be like the worst part. I didn't think he was. I thought whoever played Jafar was the worst because he was so boring and flat.
Oh, Jafar was horrible. Will Smith was horrible in it. Yeah. To me, it was just bad.
It's just a really weird cut. It's not even a cut because it's not even a cut. The camera just moves. Like it's a sustained shot as Aladdin makes his way. But instead of staying on her, it just jumps past her before she's like, still, I think, already gone. You hear the rest of the line, but it's moved on from her, which I always thought was a very odd thing to do. Wow, they're going back for more.
And right back in the breasts.
That's that bit from Dirty Work. It's like, remember, your aunt is your aunt. So she like grabs it at the funeral. She grabs him and puts his head into her tits. Oh, we miss you, Norm.
Very much. Very, very much. I was just talking with somebody today. It's been it'll be a year in September already.
Yeah. What blows my mind is that, speaking of that movie, its director and his friend, Bob Saget. Because the thing is, while I was always a Norm Macdonald fan, always. And I was always aware of him and thinking of him. Bob Saget was somebody I didn't think of much. But the idea was, as soon as he died, of course, I was watching Bob Saget, talking about him and how sad he was that his friend died. So suddenly, for the first time in ages, I was thinking about Bob Saget, and then a few months later, he dies.
He dies.
Couldn't believe that shit.
It's insane.
Yeah, he directed Dirty Work.
Dirty Work.
Right,
and I also love Screwed. Saget didn't direct that, but
Screwed's underrated, man. And it's such a weird thing because it's like a then kind of somewhat unknown Dave Chappelle, right?
Yeah.
And he and Dave Chappelle really became friends during that, as you might expect. So that's pretty cool.
They played well together on that. So
yeah, I don't know if you've been around one of the many times I've said this, but sometimes when people have comedic chemistry, it's too bad that you don't get to see more of it.
Yeah.
Like they knew, like in the case of somebody like Chris Farley and David Spade, there's plenty of that. They worked together on the show, and then they made 2 movies, and they probably would have made more if Chris Farley hadn't died. But I always thought a not a great movie or anything, but it's a movie I enjoy from the early 2000s. It's Saving Silverman. You remember Saving Silverman? Jason Biggs. But in that, you have Jack Black and Steve Zahn. And I thought their comedic chemistry was off the charts. I loved them together. And, they've never worked together since. That seems terrible to me. I was like, didn't anybody watch this movie and realize that they had something special with these two together? I don't know. I thought they were fantastic together. Like, that movie's, it's not amazing, but I think it's a pretty cool movie. It's a fun movie. But I just love those two together. I thought they had...
I think it's a lot of fun, and it's funny, and you're right. I never really thought of them being a comic duo, but you're totally right, thinking back on that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were just so good together. Judith escaped!
It'd be great if somebody heard this and took and ran with that.
Yeah, come on. They're not too old.
No.
Just like, Steve Zahn, he's an interesting guy because he's been around. He's in a lot of stuff. I think he's probably underrated comedically is one thing I would say.
Agreed.
So I don't even know how they got here, but Flip's like, let's go, screw around. And so they are. I don't remember this either. Making a dinosaur sneeze is not a good idea. Didn't you see that happen in Jurassic Park?
I did.
They're lucky, no snot for them. So he doesn't really have clothes yet, but they give him a top hat and coat, so it's a start.
So does he ever get full clothes?
He does. I swear. I'm sure he gets full clothes. Like even something on his feet. But yeah, all that's architecture and stuff. That's the comic. That's Winsor McKay. Like great stuff.
Am I blanking, or you would call that, even though it's still a nightgown, right? Or what would you call his outfit?
Yeah, is it just pajamas? Or sometimes there's such thing as a night shirt, which is like hangs down long, kind of like that.
Maybe that's what I'm trying to think of.
But I think his is all one piece, so maybe it's just pajamas.
So it's just pajamas.
I think. Maybe there's a more old-fashioned, old-timey word for it.
That's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
And night shirt was probably closest what I was thinking.
I love like the late 19th century, like at least in England and stuff, where people would have like little hats. Like who puts on a hat to go to bed? Like my sleeping hat.
Honor kerchief and I in my cap.
Yeah. Good.
I wonder what the purpose was. Keep your head warm, or I don't know.
Speaking
it's probably something sillier.
Speaking of Christmas, that's what always makes me think of. It makes me think of like a Christmas Carol, Scrooge with his on. Yeah. So we've seen that Flip is actually a wanted criminal at this point. And now you're one too. You're an accomplice. You really screwed things up for yourself, Nemo. Give Flip his hat back. He's even more grotesque without it. Down into the bowels of the castle. Nice. Like having bats fly into your face. Bat. That's fun. Oh, God.
I knew you were going to do that.
Well, like I said, Fern Gully's especially painful for me because I was forced to see it in the theater.
We've talked about this on probably every one of our...
my sister and I went to see Beethoven, and it was sold out. So our only other option for kids was to see Fern Gully. And even as a 9-year-old kid in 1992, I was like, this sucks.
It sucked. You would have been better off at Beethoven.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, I did eventually get to see Beethoven, although I don't remember if I eventually saw it in the theater or not.
I owned it on VHS.
I remember Beethoven's second better. And I definitely saw that one multiple times.
I didn't see past the second one, though. None of the straight to video.
No, me neither. Ah, okay, so yeah. So suddenly we do see that he gave him this weird key thing, and he promised the king. And the king said, just don't use it on this door. So, of course, that's what he's going to do, right? The one thing. I also like how Flip is the one that convinces him. Like, why would you listen to this idiot? He's like, because he says, he told me not to open it. We missed the part. And all Flip says is, let's open it. And he's like, you make a compelling argument. Yeah. So this is what's going to kick everything off. They've opened up Pandora's box or whatever, right? Like, you're not supposed to open this door, you idiot, but you did, and now there's going to be bad consequences. Because I think they're releasing like the nightmare. That's what's happening here. Just like there's a king of dreams, there's a king of nightmares, and I think they're letting him out. It's like, well, let's do it. Just a peek. Kind of hard to peek through a massive door. Oh, you know what I would love to find? Speaking of like a movie like 10 times worse than this, about this era, is the Felix the Cat movie. Did you see that shit?
I'm sure I did, but I don't remember a damn thing about it.
It is terrible. Like, I remember as a kid, once again, like, I watched it because I was fascinated by how bad it was. And it's like some horrific acid trip. Man, it's bad.
Because Felix the Cat in like shorts and things was pretty cool.
Pretty good.
I remember it.
Yeah, I mean, he did what he did. The movie is so random and weird and half-assed. And some of its art is kind of like Ralph Bakshi-ish, which does not play well for a kid's thing.
Doesn't play well for a kid's thing. I really
it's not
like
Ralph
it now,
Bakshi, but it kind of looks like he was involved. It's weird. Oh, that's cool.
That's gorgeous.
I like those sky chariots. So yeah, some of this kind of reminds you of like the Emerald City, but it's more. The Emerald City is only green, so we got all the colors here. It's pretty cool.
But it definitely does. And they use a lot of green.
Oh yeah. What's happening here? I don't quite remember this. Oh, right. He's supposed to show up for some. Oh, it's the coronation, right? Yeah. He does show up, which I love. He's like, oh, by the way, I did the one thing you told me not to do and release the King of Nightmares into your realm. All right, crown me. Oh, wait. If you want to see, okay, the dumbest part of the movie is coming up. Again, speaking of like Scrooge, doesn't he look like a lot of versions of like the Ghost of Christmas Past? That's kind of what he looks like. It looks like he should have like a horn of plenty. You're such an irresponsible little child. Yeah, that's a known criminal there, but anyway. Okay, so here's where he finally gets some clothes. Like, hey, we just realized now that perhaps he shouldn't be in his pajamas the whole fucking time. There you go, you're the little prince. No relation.
Okay.
Oh, he even pervs it up a bit here. That's impressive.
Oh my. In the butt.
Oh, the Pope himself. Sure, there's a dream Pope. Why not? I know that in the DC universe, there's a space Pope. And he has like a dolphin.
That's there. True. When you were just talking about Christmas Carol, the king right now kind of looks like the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like he should take out a big horn of plenty. Come in and know me better, man. But there's a dance sequence coming up, and everybody looks like they're out of their minds. Like, I get dancing is probably going to be weird, but you're not going to be prepared for how weird it is. This is something I remember vividly. It will not disappoint, and especially since the king himself joins in, so it really looks like mass hysteria. Like, you know how you hear about, like, for a few hundred years there, like in like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, there were a few cases of like spontaneous dancing. You've heard of those cases where like people would just suddenly dance for days and days until they died, and it would actually be contagious. Like this is what I imagine that was like, what they were about to do.
Was there truth to that? I always thought that was like a myth, or just a legend.
It's supposedly real. I mean, if accounts can be believed, it's something that died off by about the 17th century. There didn't seem to be any more cases of it. But yeah, apparently, I mean, from what evidence we have, those cases of spontaneous dancing were a real thing. There were documented cases of it. But you don't really know what they danced like or what the music was like. This kind of reminds me of that because this looks like the dance of the truly insane, as you're about to
I was
see.
just gonna say something with insanity, maybe bad food, polluted waters made them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shared hysteria because there are cases of like shared hysteria, just not necessarily manifesting in that way, right? Like,
yeah,
people believing in something that's not real or freaking out or something like that. The dancing thing is a little bit different because I mean, one of the most famous one is like it just started with like one woman. She's in this town square twirling by herself, but slowly people join in. And this was without any music. At least a few cases they said like the authorities decided to actually send musicians and have them play because they thought that would help them snap them out of it, and it did not at all. Huh. Right, the golden key. Oh, right, the key that I lost. I mean, makes sense for the character. Yeah, I don't really think ahead or think about the consequences of my actions. Here we go. He even says, everybody dance till dawn. He's serious. He's like, dance. Starts off normal. He will not stay normal. It's very elegant.
Looks normal, looks traditional.
Yeah, no problems here.
The kings,
Uh-oh, and the person who kicks it off is Professor Genius? That's probably the weirdest part. Okay, do what he does. Be a lunatic. Yeah, I like how he's the one that sets it off. Okay, so fine, it's still an animated thing, so you expect some spirited movement, but it's gonna
and I've done that. Heel clicks.
It's gonna go up because the king is gonna get involved. Because I get it. Oh, see, I can't let the professor show up the king. I have to be even more insane. This is where it gets almost disturbing. Because now, yeah, they look like perhaps they've gone mad. They're not done. This goes on a lot longer than you might think. The crowd's like, well, he's the king. We got to clap. That's a big scepter. Here we go. Their movements are actually in sync, which is impressive. And the first thing he wants to do is take the scepter. We've kind of figured out your character, Flip. You're a jerk. Still going. Like, it looks to me like the king and the prof have taken a lot of ecstasy. All they need is, like, glow sticks.
A lot.
I mean, I hope somewhere on YouTube somebody has, like, this, like, with them dancing with, like, the crystal method going or something.
That would be awesome.
For fans who are a bit younger than us and don't know what that means, in the 90s there was this sound that kind of was in places. It wasn't a song and it wasn't a band, and it was called the crystal method. And if you went out places, especially at night, you would hear it. And it was the crystal method. I don't think it was songs. I don't think it was albums. But it was a sound. It was energy, and that was the crystal method. There we go. Nightmares. Finally, something is actually happening. Still going.
Did you say that was around 96 or 97?
Which was?
97. The crystal method.
When they first came out?
Yeah, I kind of remember that in high school.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. I mean, late 90s for sure. I'm not sure how early, but I mean, late 90s was their heyday. It's when they were kind of everywhere. Like I said, you couldn't really go places, at least at night. Any place at night, it's happening, playing.
Oh, yeah, they're really kicking it up now.
Yeah, at least some of those musicians are actually worried. Nobody notices the literal stuff of nightmares seeping around them. Finally. What's all this then? It's Venom. We are Venom.
And from what I looked up of Icarus, I don't think he appeared in the video game, but it had like 3 other animals that he rides on or something.
Huh. Yeah, I'm sure Icarus was just invented for this movie. I'm almost positive he's not in the original strip. They were just like, it's an animated thing for kids. We got it to have some sort of funny animal sidekick. Even though he's in like the literal realm of dreams with fantastic things and creatures all around him, you still need that.
Gotta have the cute little squirrel.
You need your animal sidekick. Oh, kind of dark here. King's gone.
And the smoke cleared.
We're lucky it only wanted the king. Who opened the forbidden door? Well, gee, who had the key? Looks like exit stage, right? I mean, they're not wrong. You could say that's profiling, but they're right. And of course, he says, it was Nemo! Because he's a stand-up guy, aren't you, Flip? I mean, come on. Flip has no reputation. Just say, he stole the key from me. He knocked me down and laughed. I mean, Flip's a known criminal. Oh, we're going to have our false awakening? Yeah, so I don't know how you feel about this. This is a false awakening. I know it's a spoiler. He's not really awake. He's still in the dream. And I guess that's okay to use once. See, this almost seems to suggest, that they're sharing the same, that they're both asleep and sharing the same dream. Maybe, I don't know. But the fact is, see, as you can see, the scepter's here, so he is still in the dream.
He's still in the dream.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it annoyed me, but isn't that kind of how we were talking about the comics, how they kind of worked? Each end of this, he'd wake up.
Yeah, that was the ending for like everything.
Every comic.
I mean, there were ongoing ones, so sometimes it wasn't always, but like anytime something ended, it was him waking up, and he might cry out or fall out of bed, and then his parents might come in and yell at him for eating sweets or something, like over and over again. If I can find it, there's a pretty good line in the book about it. In Slumberland, the threats are never felt, the victories never celebrated. Nemo's face never shows real fear, though he often says he's afraid. Ooh, I was scared. It's almost impossible to predict what will frighten him. A witch or a gigantic elephant with a raised foot may not bother Nemo, while pretty fireworks or gently falling snowflakes may terrify him. That's kind of funny. At least in this, they give him a little more range. He does actually look afraid when he's supposed to and things like that. Yeah. Nemo, unlike superheroes, and unlike even Casper or Archie, is not a problem solver. He doesn't take care of business. He mostly just watches, and that's his role in this movie is just to react to shit. Oh man, I thought there was a thing in here about the parents, which I thought was... Here we go. On the surface of it, Winsor McCay looks like the anti-Freud. Little Nemo seems to suggest that dreams, instead of being complex, important psychic work for the dreamer, are just fanciful vacations that we should enjoy while they last. Nemo's dreams are not the keys to his own unconscious, but just pleasure trips that leave him back where he began, in bed, with authority figures looming nearby, remote and vaguely disapproving. In Nemo, it is gluttony, not secret desire, that brings vivid and overwhelming visions during sleep. Winsor McCay was apparently obsessed with the link between gastric distress and dream images. So, yeah. Alright, finally time to do a bit of a quest. Gotta save the king. Gotta go to the Nightmare Land. So, unlike maybe the comic, he is finally doing something. Some of the hero's journey. Time to descend into the underworld. So this makes him a little more proactive than he probably ever was in the comic. So that's something. I mean, he's still not going to be that proactive. He's still mostly just going to be reacting, but he's going to try to do some shit. So here we go. I have to find that idiot Flip, of course. Yeah, as you'll see, once they get to Nightmare Land, all the colors are very muted, creating a bit of a contrast.
Still right here, just a second.
Yeah, no problem. Heave-ho. Oh, man. I like their punishment. Death by cannon. They're going to fire him out of a cannon. I like that. That's right up there with death by catapult.
In the dream world, would that really be like a death, though?
Maybe it's not death. Maybe it's just banishment. Just get him out of here. I don't know. Again, this is a world whose rules are not clearly defined, right? Like, what are the consequences? How badly can you get hurt? You know, is there death? I don't know. Because the whole danger of the king is not necessarily that he's dead or could be hurt. It's that he's away. You know, he's in a different place. So yeah, it is very hard to understand what the stakes are in Slumberland or whatever.
He's back in his pajamas.
Yeah. It's like the False Awakening was like a weird reset. I do like that she was totally okay with it. Until, yeah. I mean, I get it. She's grief-stricken. She doesn't know what happened to her father. She wants to blame somebody. And Flip is more or less responsible, but Nemo's equally responsible. But anyway. This is not a time for moralizing. What's it worth? Flip is already ready to bargain, even though they just saved him from being fired out of a cannon. I mean, I know the map must actually work, even though they say it doesn't. They must figure something out. And what is the point of that? Just to make things complicated.
I miss smoking in cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's not like they're showing it's cool. They're showing that this guy is sort of a bad villain dude. You know, he's not.
They won't even do it with the villains anymore, though. I don't think.
No, and I don't get that. Like, I do understand that kids are like impressionable and stuff. But I think
you don't want the heroes smoking, but
yeah, but I think you can still have a sympathetic character who smokes.
Well, I would, because that's reality, but
yeah. Just like if you watch older movies, more people smoke because that's what more people smoked back then, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a normal thing. I mean, it's good that less people smoke now. People are more health conscious and things like that. That's good. But
yeah, I'm not against that, and I'm a smoker.
There you go.
It's awful. It's horrible. But
wasn't it like Rob Reiner had actually wanted to like remove smoking from older movies or something?
That son of a bitch.
I mean, that's so stupid. It's a weird cause for Rob Reiner to champion, but I don't know. He doesn't seem exactly like the paragon of health, but
that's true.
Again, it's, wanting to educate people and tell them, you shouldn't smoke. It's not good for your health. It's a waste of money and stuff like that. But yeah, As far as like telling stories, sometimes maybe a character smokes.
And going back to the very beginning, a villain.
Given the setting. Oh my god, an owl reference.
Oh, I thought that was gone.
I don't know. What's funny is my experience with him was he would just leave comments on the movie discussion pocket dimension stuff that I did with Jay. That was my only interaction with him, and he acted normal there. You know, I never had seen him or really interacted with him directly. So
you're better off that way, Cole.
If you go back a few months, were you there? Yeah, you were there, right? When I was finding out all this stuff, and you guys were showing me.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They showed me like Dan was there and some other people, and they were showing because I was like, I don't understand what happened. And like, oh, he was on the stream with us. See, I didn't know that at the time when they were talking about like this owl guy freaking out and having a meltdown. I thought it was just in the chat. I did not know he was on camera, part of the stream, yelling at everybody and threatening everybody. Like I had no idea. So yeah, I only found that out later.
And that is true, Mr. Cal 905. That was at the very beginning, and like you said, 5 minutes. I can't even replay that. We deleted it.
Yeah, but Hayden or somebody had some of it or something like that because I saw it.
Oh, the actual meltdown. Yes, the show I did with him that we did one episode on a channel that.
Well, watch this reaction. Oh, so they're trying to drag her in. The squirrel jumps in. Oh, help! I love that delay. They just stand there and gawk for like 20 full seconds. And it's not until the squirrel does something, they're like, hey, maybe we should try to do something.
That the humans, the strength.
I mean, come on. Yeah. That's actually a funny bit. But no, I don't know what happened now. I think he got in real trouble because didn't he like make actual threats and do actual harassment to people? Like, I know he did stuff I don't know to, like, Jamie or somebody. Like, he like called like people. I don't know how he got phone numbers, but he actually like called people. So I think he got in real legal trouble. So I don't know.
He threw out addresses. He made threats towards Dan Shine with a gun. So I don't know if they actually caught up with him or he just disappeared.
Yeah, I don't know. My favorite part of that is when he starts yelling about how he's 5'11".
I know.
What does that mean?
Corey's 7'5". And...
Yeah. And Dan yells back, "I'm also 5'11". What is your point? What are we talking about here? It's like we're both average size. Okay. I also love that he stood up for it. He's standing and he's in a jacket. It's pretty funny.
His security jacket, his flight jacket.
Yeah. So no, like all that was delayed for me. He was just some name I knew that would more or less be supportive to Jay and I. And I just found out all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was even way after that I found out in depth what it was because I didn't fully understand at first. I thought it was just comments. Like I did not know that people were directly interacting with him and he was on streams. Like I didn't know that until months later.
Dude went off the rails, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he was. I mean, I think the whole community really thought, he was pretty cool at first, or seemed like it, and he wasn't.
But I mean, the other thing was right, like how he would just like go on and on about his weird life in really graphic detail, like talking about like frequenting prostitutes and stuff.
Prostitutes, yeah.
All right, so we have some shape-shifting goblins here.
Here we go.
They're not much of a threat. They're actually going to have a brief song here, and it's really bad. No. It's bad. No. Like, the songs in this have not been very good, but they've been at least, they're not going to hurt your ears or anything. But,
those creatures in the lake seem more threatening.
Yeah, but we're not... Oh, these guys, they turn out to be, like, that's what... Yeah, they're going to actually help them. The creatures in the lake definitely were more threatening, but we don't see them again. Yeah. We're your friends. Yeah, now we're going to sing a terrible song.
Well, like you said, thank God it's brief.
He called her Princessy. Oh, they helped draw the map? Yeah, we can turn into that one thing. A tree thing and, like, ball. Like a ball. Oh, here we go. Boomps. They're the Boomps. That's a good name.
Sadly, I don't think this is the worst song in the movie that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
God, that one just reminded me of like Teletubbies or something.
Yeah. It's pretty disturbing when they merge together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite as disturbing as like the scene in Labyrinth with those things that sing the song and throw their heads around.
Oh yeah. Oh, Labyrinth's got all sorts of creepiness. It's great.
Yeah, Jamie and I are supposed to do that one, but she's had to take some time off, so I don't know.
Yeah, she's doing some quick things on her channel, it seems, but she'd been busy to where she hadn't been able to get on our shows for a while, even.
Yeah. No, she and I had some stuff planned that's kind of had to be put on the back burner, but that's all right.
It happens, life.
But yeah, it is my hope that in some form or another there'll be a Labyrinth commentary. That's one. I did do Dark Crystal, but I did it by myself, so it's not particularly interesting. All right, here we go.
You're out of the woods, you're out of the dark.
There's like the one chance in the movie for character development. Let's see what they do. Oh, they already forget it's like Shazama, Pajama. Also, speaking of like these 80s movies, so there's a part towards the incantation they're talking about, like towards the end, spoilers, he's gonna have to remember it and yell it out to like blast the Nightmare King or whatever. And he screams it so many times it becomes pretty incoherent. It reminds me of the part towards the end of the Neverending Story where the kid is supposed to yell the princess's name, and you can listen to it 1,000 times. It does not sound like he's saying her name or anything. It sounds like he's just making a bunch of sounds. He's like, like I've like rewound it and backed it up and listened to it, and he just, I don't know. Couldn't they have done another take? Because it's ridiculously incoherent. I was like, that's her name? Like, say that again? But it reminds me of that, what's going to happen. But at least for Nemo's defense, he has to repeat it several times. So at first it sounds like something, but as he repeats it, it becomes more nonsensical in a way. So here's the Wizard of Oz thing I'm talking about. This is very reminiscent. Yeah, the party is now being attacked by flying monkeys. I have no idea if something like this ever happened in the comic. Probably not. I don't think the comic ever got this dark. And it'd be great if they just took the professor off and like dropped him off a cliff or tore him apart. That's helpful. Princess. Hell, you fucked that up. See, here's my thing. Because this is yet another false awakening. So, I mean, I don't mind doing it once, but I don't know about doing it again. It's kind of my thing. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, as you can see. Like, and it's right away. This time they don't even try to fake you out. It's like, okay, obviously still in the dream because everybody's here. I must still be in the dream. Good thinking.
So then, yeah, what's the point
Yeah.
for the plot to do this?
Yeah, it's not well written, I would say. Because, like, you can do it once, sure, but to do it again, and also to do it again in such a fashion that you immediately know what's happening, Focus. That'll do it. Oh, there he goes. So sick of that nonsense. Focus for the man. I didn't even move. Okay, hold on.
There are definitely moments of this movie I'm appreciating more as an adult, but still, all in all, yeah, man, it does drag.
Yeah, it amounts to very little. Damn, that didn't help. This is the other camera. Sometimes if I switch cameras and then switch back, let's see. Yeah, that did the trick. Stubborn thing. Okay, what are they doing? Secret to use the scepter. And speaking of the scepter, that kind of reminds me of Starman. That was Starman. That was his thing. He had a scepter thing. It wasn't magic. It was technological, but it allowed him to fly and project energy blasts.
Why don't I remember that from Starman?
I'm talking about the DC Comics character.
Again. Oh, okay.
The one that I name dropped when I was talking about the DC Sandman. No. Yes. So there's been quite a few different Starmans, but the original was a guy, a Golden Age hero called Ted Knight. And he didn't have powers or anything, but he was a scientist. And he had like a cool scepter thing. And he could fly with it and project energy blasts. And the 90s guy I was talking about, had a cool 90s series, was his second son, Jack, who was like a reluctant Gen X 90s hero who reluctantly took up his father's mantle after his older brother died doing it. And it was sort of like an anti thing because like he didn't really want to do it and he refused to wear a costume and stuff. So if you look him up, he wears like a leather jacket and flight goggles. It's a really good. James Robinson did it. It's a really one of the better series of the 90s at a time when a lot of those comics were getting criticized. Really not like Sandman, but like some of that Dark Age stuff I was talking about. Like Cable and Deadpool and Venom and Punisher and Wolverine, and not that any of that was not that it was all bad, but how it got kind of over the top and juvenile sometimes. Yes. It's just about being dark and violent. Starman was kind of like different. It was much more story based. It was really cool. I don't have too many of the individual comics, but I have some omnibuses. It's a really great series. But yeah, what was also interesting is DC made several different Starmen that were unrelated, that just used the name. One was like a blue guy who was an alien. He had different powers. One guy was also an alien, but he more or less seemed human, but he was from a far away, and he was like the prince of some faraway planet. There was at least one. Oh, and then there was one who was like a super-powered human named Will Payton, who only lasted for a little while in the late 80s. And what was cool is like the Starman series I'm referring to eventually mentions them and even brings them into the story, which I always thought was cool. But yeah, I kind of really, I always have a fascination with things that don't last long in anything, not just comics. But I've always had a fascination with things that, we might have had this conversation before, I don't know, but things that didn't last. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a comic. It'd be like if a band had a period where they, like for an album or two, had a different lead singer or something like that, like, and then they went back to their old singer. It's that kind of thing. So I always have an obsession with that. So I have a lot of things like that. Like Jean-Paul, cool. In the comics, I've got like everything with Jean-Paul Valley as Batman or Ben Reilly as Spider-Man, things like that. But I mean, also it extends to other things. Like, yeah, I'm always interested in sort of the black sheep stuff or the stuff that didn't last.
I was just gonna say the kind of non-popular.
So the Will Payton Starman series, it was really short. So I would love to collect those. I don't think they'd really be rare or worth any money. I just think they'd be cool to have. He was arguably the most powerful Starman because he actually was like a super powered human of some sort he didn't need a scepter or anything. He flew. He was kind of like what's known in the business as a flying brick. Superman's the most famous, but it just means, like Rogue or somebody, somebody with the power of flight, but they also have super strength and durability. I do give credit to the movie because it's going certainly a lot darker than the original comic ever did. They are trying to add some conflict. They are trying to add some darkness. It's not bad. I mean, this is actually a pretty good sequence.
I was just
being
thinking
on a
that.
flying bed, going over the ocean and cliffs and being chased. That is pretty cool. So they lost the princess somehow. I missed that.
I did as well.
Oh yeah, I guess the monkeys got her, right? Because it was after or whatever they were. They had her, and then he had his false awakening. They came with him, but she didn't. So I guess she's been captured too, and the professor, I guess too, because I think it's just him and the goblins, and possibly Icarus. Oh, speaking of Lovecraft, look at that thing. No, it's a manta ray. Never mind. Yeah, so I guess the princess and professor have both been captured. I guess. I mean, yeah, this is a fairly ominous landscape, not something that was in the comic. Oh, there's like some sort of magical force field.
Any of you in the chat, do you guys remember Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland?
What about like the Dream Master, the video game? Because that's really, I think, the first thing I knew about Nemo or remember or experience was like either renting that or maybe Ryan rented or something and playing it on Nintendo. And it's a pretty good game by Capcom. So,
and that was probably the more popular thing related to this in the
at least over
North
here.
America.
Right. So the King of Nightmares. Who is that? That's oh, you recognize the name.
Oh, in the opening credits.
Bill Martin, or no, I guess it was Go. You recognize it was Bill Martin, whoever the hell that is. But I don't really think he's well cast. He doesn't sound like his design is good. Look, he's imposing and scary. I don't think the voice really matches up with it.
Oh, you're right. No.
So you can see he looks a lot like the devil thing from Fantasia, Night on Bald Mountain. Maybe scaled back a little to look not quite as demonic, but yeah.
Pretty darn close though.
Yeah, but pretty good. But yeah, I don't feel like it. Again, it's another reason why I really want to get the Blu-ray and hear the Japanese dub. I'm interested to hear what the voices are like, because I wonder if the Japanese voice fits him better than this Bill Martin guy. Because I don't think his voice is very good. They're in like a black void. Nightmare Castle. Yeah, some of the stuff in the Realm of Nightmare is probably better than I remembered. Because at least there is some sort of element of danger or suspense, at least for a kid's movie. Not bad. Oh, look at that's actually pretty cool. I mean, like a lot of these type of movies, though, like defeating him is going to be too easy. But
I stumbled upon. They tried to put Little Nemo in a musical in the theater. Put it on the stage.
It had sort of like brief run, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that somewhere. I mean, it's one of those things that's been. It's an intellectual property that's been around so long. There's been all sorts of attempts or at least ideas. Most of them that didn't come into fruition. Just like the Disney thing. I wonder if I could find. Oh, I won't look now, but I wonder if there's anything about it on the Disney wiki.
A 1984 film called Nemo, or Dream One, starring Jason Connery, Harvey Keitel.
Okay, so another thing, yeah. Speaking of that, is remember I was talking about that Blu-ray. It had something extra on it. Let me see if I can find what it said again, because it was kind of interesting. Shit. Yeah, November 6, 2012, Discotek released the Blu-ray. This is what I'm talking about. Film containing the Japanese dub and original English audio tracks, and included bonus features such as the pilot films from 84 and 87. So maybe that's what you're talking about, the 84 one.
Must be.
So,
and then they're talking about a live-action film adaptation, Slumberland. That's sort of in pre-production right now.
Oh, right now, huh? I mean, it has good possibilities because, again, the story is fairly loose. You can do a lot with it, and the concept is kind of limitless. It's a dream world. Make it as crazy or whatever as you want.
Oh no, it's done. It's supposed to be on Netflix this year.
Holy shit! Well, I'm pretty interested in that. I mean, I do think this is something that lends itself better to animation, but as we can see, this movie's kind of a disappointment, so it's not like I hold this to any high standard, although the animation really is its saving grace. This is really good stuff. And we all know that the studio did go on to do some good quality work, if not full-length or feature-length films anymore, which is too bad.
Oh, they're doing a flip on it. Instead of Nemo, it's Nema, and it's a girl.
I mean, it doesn't really change much. Nemo is such a bland, empty character, right? Like
it is, really... but is it necessary?
It's not necessary, and Nemo's just not as good a name, really. I mean, Nemo's a cool name.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know if I've ever talked about this before, but again, with my love of fantasy and things like that, and that has nothing to do against this in general, and it's not like a rule, because I think you need both, but I personally prefer the girl protagonist, and I think it's just because of classic stuff, like Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz. They kind of set, like, this template. So, like, stuff I write, I almost always have, like, a girl protagonist for this sort of thing. I just prefer it. But that doesn't mean there aren't good boy protagonists. I mean, Harry Potter's a pretty good boy protagonist, stuff like that. But just personally, I feel like the girls fit better in a fantasy world. I don't know why, but I mean, I don't think, this would always be better if it was a girl or something. I just know what I like.
I'm fine with that,
but no, I don't think it's
this
necessary.
Character specifically.
And as I said, Nemo is
not Nema.
Yeah, and Nemo's such a blank slate. He doesn't really have much personality. He just goes, wow, and uh-oh, and oh no. Oh, God.
Jason Momoa is going to be Flip.
A gigantic muscle-bound Flip? That's a different spin on things. That is crazy.
Oh, it doesn't give a month release, but it says to be released
look
on
at
Netflix.
His movements. Like, that looks like it was lifted right out of Fantasia. The lifting of the arms. Hello, Jamie. Thank you for stopping by.
Hey, Jamie.
Thanks very much. Chimera. I wish he'd say Komota. That'd be funny. Komota is atomic backwards. It's the word that would turn originally Marvel Man, later Miracle Man, into that. It's a spin-off because that character was just a British ripoff of Shazam. The whole idea with that Captain Marvel was he'd say Shazam, he'd transform. But speaking of Neil Gaiman, that's another thing he worked on was he did the new arc after Alan Moore left the original 80s revival of Miracle Man, which at the time was still Marvel Man. And that started in 82. So whenever people talk about like dark deconstructions of like superhero stuff, it's a lot older than you think, because I would say that's where it started, 1982 Miracle Man, where it was just like, take the gloves off, and it's like, what if Superman just killed people? Or, that's where it finally came in. Stuff that we're seeing now all over the place, like it's a new thing. Like, I mean, I like Garth Ennis. He's a pretty good writer, but he's also kind of one note. And his disdain for superheroes is a little over the top. Like, I've enjoyed The Boys, but how far can you take that concept? Like, what if superheroes were all just horrible pricks? It's like, I don't know. Let's just watch it.
Which is cool to touch on it, but yeah, I don't know if that can sustain itself that long.
I mean, Invincible kind of did the same thing. Irredeemable did it even before that. Irredeemable hasn't had a show yet, but Invincible has a animated show, which is worth watching. But again, it seems like the same sort of idea again. In that one, it's like, actually, most of the heroes are okay, but it's the idea. It's more or less, what if the guy who basically was Superman, who had always been good, just seems to out of nowhere change to evil? That's what's going on there, and it's fine.
Which is an awesome idea and concept.
And it's full of
I wouldn't want to see it for a long
violence.
period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We don't look for superheroes to be like that.
That's the same. That's Robert Kirkman. So that's the guy that wrote Evil Dead. This is pretty cool. This chamber. They're imprisoned. I missed the transition here, so I'm not sure what happened before this. Nemo's passed out, though. Did he take out the bad guy and I didn't even notice? I think he did.
It all happened pretty quick.
I think I talked through his pajamas, the spazzing moment where he finally blasted him away. I think Scepter's still there. Yeah, I guess he did it. I guess we talked through it. So, oh well. Nemo's definitely dead. Roll credits.
But wait, there's more.
King can do all sorts of stuff with the scepter. So maybe he should keep it. At least he comes clean about opening the door. Yeah, Nightmare King's gone. It's courage, huh? I think it was just a bunch of babbling, but it worked. So, whatever works. I wonder what implications this has on Nemo's psyche going forward. Does that mean he'll never have a nightmare for the rest of his life? He's like banished nightmares forever? And he banished them just from his world. That's the other thing, too. Is Slumberland a shared world that we can all access? Is it something only Nemo can access? And if it's something other people can access, can we interact? Or is it, is it a different experience for each person? And we can't overlap. And, these things are not explored, obviously. But it is kind of interesting to think about. Even this, the presence of the lions there, again, makes you think of like the end of Wizard of Oz. It's like they're having their big celebratory thing in the Emerald City. Ding dong.
Well, there's a lot more of that than I thought when you said that at the beginning. I mean, there's even in background characters, if you really want to stretch the imagination. I saw scarecrow-looking people. I saw.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff. I mean, the original source material predates the movie. But you have to believe that probably over time, at least some of it was still inspired by the movie anyway. Because it's not 100% just only that. But as I said, if you look, you can look it up and you can see like panels and stuff. The art style is very faithful. The coloring is very faithful. So, I mean, I give it credit for that. Like I said, the movie, it's not that bad. It's just not that good. I mean, that's really, and
that's the best way to put it.
I mean, it's just too bad things shook out the way they did because it was in production hell for so long and it had such a troubled time and people being part of it and then dropping out and all these changes. I mean, that's never good for any movie. This was a movie 7 years in the making with a lot of false starts and backpedaling and things. And I don't know. I mean, it's still certainly a success. Good old New York. It's a good success. It's a success animation-wise. It's certainly a good showcase for what the studio is capable of.
Yeah, definitely. It just drags in so many points of the movie.
And as I said, like, it's not like the comic was very deep or complicated. So am I supposed to like get mad at them that Nemo's such a bland character? I mean, that's what he is. This is honestly, compared to the comic, the most character development he's had. He actually faced some real danger, maybe learned a lesson or two, grew up a little bit. I don't know. He hasn't grown up enough to kiss a girl in the streets though. Oh, come on, you got to try. Wake up before it goes. Yeah, and that is kind of the logical waking up point. Just when things were getting good.
That's how it happens.
Yeah, so she's gonna get mad at him about a pie, I think, in a callback to the original. The ending is so stupid too here. So like early we might have talked here. So remember we saw the parade. The parade was just the circus arriving in town. So yesterday he asked his parents, "Can we go to the circus?" And they're like, "I don't know, Nemo. We're pretty busy. Blah blah blah." But now today, I broke my promise and ate the pie. Yeah, so he's gonna say, "Guess what? We can go to the circus." And like he's so psyched for it. I'd be like, even if what you had was technically a dream, but you remember it perfectly and experience it more vividly than anybody else, and yet he is so pumped for the circus. I love it. Like that's the happy ending of this movie.
Good point.
Oh my God, we're actually going to the circus. I mean, I get it again. It's early 1900s. The world isn't full of thrills. At least different.
No, but like you said, the dream he just had, that very vivid dream.
Yeah, this fantastic adventure.
Is like a circus.
Where he's like
times
flying
10.
And stuff. I know, but he's like, and that's how it ends. We're gonna go to the circus. Oh, I'm so lucky.
Oh, gee,
kind of
many chillikers.
Stupid ending. So that's Finding Nemo, a very flawed movie, but you understand if you look into the history of it, you understand why it had such a troubled production, such a strange genesis. I certainly feel bad for some of the people involved, particularly the person it all started with, Oshitaka, because like he was done once this movie was over. He retired. He was like, no more. Like the company kept going, his animation studio kept going, and would go on to do things, but he personally was done. And I mean, it was certainly for the best that like Miyazaki and Takahata did not get involved in this, because their ideas were too original and had really nothing to do with the source material. And then they got to go do them, and make those movies with Studio Ghibli. As I said, there's an irony to this movie, is that at the very beginning, what was envisioned by the producer was to elevate Japanese animation because it was kind of stuck. And while he was sort of struggling to make that happen, Studio Ghibli emerged on its own and did it itself. And even other things like, again, like in '88, the year before this movie, Akira, which was a huge landmark movie, came out. So by the time this movie came out, Japanese animation had reached that other level. They were now among the best in the world, right up there with Disney. But this movie was not really seen as part of that or given any credit for it. Although, as you've seen, it's lovely animation. I think it's on par with anything we've covered, any of the Bluth stuff and things like that.
On par, and again, even the backdrops, I was amazed at the detail. The background.
I mean, a lot, and it's funny how many talented people at least touched this movie if they didn't stay with it. I mean, it's interesting to me that Mobius wound up being part of writing the original story, which is pretty cool. But so I mean, I have to imagine some of those designs were him too. You don't have Mobius in your movie just to write stuff. He obviously must have contributed art. But
beautifully.
And I said, it is kind of interesting because this is how John Lasseter met Miyazaki. It's also how Miyazaki met Mobius. So that's kind of cool because that would lead to relationships and a lot of mutual admiration and respect and things.
Like you said at the beginning of this, the history of this film itself is more interesting.
And that's why I thought it was worth talking about.
Yeah.
So thanks to anybody tuning in live, or if you're watching this some point in the future. Yeah, I was really, knowing that this was on Prime, because I mean, I had a burnt copy of it, but I was hoping, it would be available so that you could also watch it. Knowing this was on Prime, for the last few months, I knew I definitely want to do it because, we're trying to do something a little different. I know other people have talked about the movie too, but yeah, there's just a lot of stuff about the movie that interests me. And I'm always interested in movies like this too, because you always think about what if or what could have been.
Yeah.
Things could have been differently. It could have been great. And it could have significantly impacted the animation industry, and it could have changed the career trajectory of some of these people that were involved. Certain people that, if they'd stayed on or whatever, it's always interesting to me to ponder those sort of what if situations. Just like I'm always interested. Yeah,
because there's a lot of good things going for this movie, except,
I mean, the story's pretty flat.
The story, yeah, which is
and the
very,
voice
very
acting
important.
is not, and the voice acting isn't very good. But at the same time, they're not given much to work with. So how much can I complain about that? I really want to hopefully find that Blu-ray so I can see the extra stuff and also see the Japanese dub and see also if the Japanese dub has the extra 10 minutes. It wasn't really made clear in anything I read if that's true or not. I think it is. I think that's what it is. So that interests me to see what is in there. So
obviously, if you do get a hold of that, you ought to tell me what you found.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do a follow-up. But yeah, so that was, again, the main reason I wanted to do the movie, because I just think it's, the movie itself, if you don't know anything about it, it's kind of underwhelming. Certainly nice animation, but you might not give it another thought. But like, if you know the story behind it and everything, and of course, as I said, I think a lot of people aren't even really aware of the original comic strip by Winsor McCay, which is somewhat primitive, of course, being over 100 years old, but it still remains a massively influential piece of like Western art. It really is. I mean, it's a landmark in newspaper strips and comics in general. And even all these years later, a lot of it does hold up. Some of it, of course, doesn't hold up, but a lot of it does hold up just for the sheer and imagination in it and things like that. I mean, Winston McKay, as he said, he wasn't interested in maybe the psychology of dreams or the symbolism or anything like that, but he did take advantage of the idea of a fantasy world and the limits of your imagination and things like that. And again, think how different the landscape would have been back then. No editor is going to be like, we need a deeper story, we need a more compelling protagonist.
Oh,
he
no,
needs something.
no.
He needs something to fill the page that looks nice. And Winsor McKay was a very good artist. And also, as I said, the format of newspapers would change so drastically in the decades to follow. But at the time, he had a free hand almost. He had a lot more freedom than cartoonists after him would have. They'd be much more restricted. And he really did try to make advantage of that. If you look up some of the stuff, he was very experimental with his layout and panels and things like that.
I was just going to say, those of you who are listening, look up Little Nemo comic.
Yeah, he would do all sorts of interesting things like scale. Like sometimes he'd have Little Nemo like shrink in a dream, and he'd see everything huge, or he'd be big, and he'd do all this cool stuff with perspective. And you're thinking, this is for a newspaper comic strip 100-some years ago. But so it's not like there wasn't effort. So there was real effort put into it. The one thing I will say is, again, the lettering is shit. The lettering looks like no effort. It's too bad. Back then, people weren't cognizant of that kind of thing, and he couldn't have hired somebody that could actually do it. Lettering is one of the most overlooked things in all comics. And I'll point out, even as somebody like me, a big connoisseur, it's not something I usually think about or harp on, but I will say that's one thing that's very distinct about, since we talked about the Sandman, the Neil Gaiman thing, is that while it had different artists, obviously it always had Neil Gaiman, and the looks changed, it always had the same letterer, whose name I can't remember. And he had a very cool, elegant style that kind of kept everything... It added some uniformity to it, some consistency. Where other things would change, the lettering style was still the same. It's funny, I remember even before the show, just 2 years ago, because I follow Neil Gaiman on Twitter and people blabbing about things and showing their death tattoos and all that shit. I remember certain young people who, as I'm sure like they don't teach kids how to write or read cursive anymore, and a lot of not necessarily the dialogue, but a lot of if you had narrative captions, a lot of that would be written in cursive, and people were saying they couldn't read it, which to somebody like you or me is funny.
Yeah, it is.
I haven't personally written cursive in a while, but I know I can still do it, and I can absolutely.
I'm the same way.
I can absolutely read it, so it seems odd to me that kids nowadays cursive seems like some bizarre, impenetrable thing. I'm like, it's not that different, really.
No, it's not.
I like how in England they just say what it is.
I can write it if I have to.
In England, they simply call it joined up writing. They're calling it what it is.
It's what it is, yeah.
It is what it is. So, but anyway, that's one of the only comics where I can actually say, the lettering stands out to me, and I actually think about it and remember it. Is the Sandman thing. So, as we said, it's entirely coincidental that we wound up doing this at the same time around the Sandman Netflix series has debuted, and everybody's talking about the comic and the show and everything. I always wanted to do this regardless, but it makes sense because, as I said, I'm a sucker for dream stuff. So even the weaker dream stuff, that's one of the things I like about even something so different like Nightmare on Elm Street, right? It's a cool concept, a bad guy that gets you in the dream world. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So I've always there's certain narrative devices or tropes or things that I'm always going to be drawn to, and dreams, that's a big one. So it's pretty cool. So thanks again for anybody that joined us. Really appreciate it. We'll wrap it up. We don't want to drag too long here. But yeah, I just think it's a super interesting movie, at least from, its genesis and creation and everything like that. The execution leaves a little bit desired. It's certainly worth a watch, I would say, at least for the animation and things. So
definitely.
So if you haven't watched it, I would recommend giving it a watch. It's just a 90-minute movie, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. And at the very least, you can appreciate what lovely animation the studio did produce, and the artists and the concept artists that worked on it. At least that. And as I said, it's interesting to always ponder what if, what if things have been different, or even if the movie was the same, but like I said, if perhaps the U.S. release date hadn't been delayed. I feel like if it had come out at the same time as Japan, it might have done a little better than in 92. I think 92 was bad timing for it, which helped it fall through the cracks. Again, I understand it falling through the cracks because it's somewhat mediocre. But anyway, I'm at the risk of repeating myself, so everything in there. So thanks again so much, Little Nemo. Not sure what's next in this series of animation, but there's lots of possibilities. So Jess and I
I was going to ask if you had anything on your mind or you wanted to save it as a surprise.
No, I mean, I probably would save it actually, but honestly, not in particular because I've been anticipating this one for so long. I wasn't really thinking ahead too much, but I mean, there's lots of possibilities. So Jess and I will figure that out between us, and we'll get another one out there when we can. So
Heck yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night. Peace out, and we will see you all next time.